Hello, Larry Murphy. Got something on my mind. Let me begin with how it is in our world today that we can find light versions of just about anything, from a beer, light beer, to fat-free cookies. And included right along with these light versions is light Christianity. Now, one thing that all these light versions hold in common is that an ingredient has been removed to make them so. With food and drink, well, that might be the sugar, the sodium. Now, with Christianity, the ingredient was removed. That was removed was the one put into it by Jesus, and that is in Matthew. He told us to bear crosses and deny ourselves. Now that things have been removed over the last few decades can be evidenced by the number of behaviors that at one time were considered as sinful. But they've been removed. They're no longer on the list. Now I imagine for some sinners that might like to be part of a church but don't want to give up, their lifestyle, that would be an ideal situation. Because in a light church, you're not going to be required to make any drastic changes, to how you live. Certainly, not going to be much denying oneself the sinful pleasures of life. The proliferation of light Christianity came about, for two reasons. I'm sure not more, but I have time for two. One is, who wouldn't love a church that on one hand told you you were right with God, and then on the other told you it is okay to live just however you want to live. Don't worry about denying yourself the pleasures of sin. Another reason was that over the past few decades, churches, denominations have spent millions of dollars on marketing research, all kind of surveys to find out what sinners want. What sinners would like to hear in order to attract them to that church, to that, denomination. And, one thing most of these surveys held in common is that, sinners don't like being called sinners. They say that's judgmental. It's insensitive to tell them that they are doing anything wrong, that they need to repent of anything that might be regarded as a sin by someone else. But you could give up feeling guilty. That was something you could remove from your life. All this began coming on the scene back in the 1950s, probably earlier, but in the 50s, you could see churches, denominations, ministers adopting a business mindset in which the church was a business that you wanted to prosper and make grow. And one of the things you had to do if you were going to conduct a business is you had to adopt sound business principles. And one of the most basic of these is that to stay in business, you've got to give the customer, a sinner in this case, what they want. Now the practical consequence of this has been that we now have a weak church. At the worst possible time. It seems now when the church is at its weakest, Satan is at his strongest. But this is not coincidental, I submit to you. This is a diabolical design. Because you see, the devil can only be as strong as he is and effective as he is if the church is as weak and ineffective as it is. The consequence is we've got ourselves a situation. We're in a situation in which the world is desperate. Desperate for a Christianity that is full body. All the calories, the sodium, everything, and nothing removed from it but a biblical Christianity. No more pop theology. No more pop psychology from the pulpit and education material. But sound doctrine. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? If you're familiar with the Bible, you know that in 2 Timothy that we were warned that the time would come when people would not stand for sound doctrine. Instead, they would, to satisfy their lust, seek out preachers that would tell them what their itching ears wanted to hear. Sinners' ears have been scratched long enough. The world is in desperate need of some Christians getting down on their knees. Congregations, ministers, on down the line, get down upon our knees and pray to God that He forgive us because we have shirked our duty. Now, will this mean that some preachers might lose their job if they repent of not preaching what they should have been, but then start addressing sin in their churches, telling the congregation that they are sinners, and telling, well, this is what's going to get you in trouble, telling the people on your boards and committees that they are sinners, and unless they change their ways, they're in for a hell of a heap of trouble. Yeah, that'll get you sent down the road real quick, but that's what your job is. And actually, if it is a job to you, you don't need to be doing it anyway. Will some churches go out of business if they stop pandering to sinners and start, getting honest with them and tell them, look, you keep living like this, there's going to be some dire consequences. You got to stop. You've got to admit, whether you like it or not, you are a sinner in need of forgiveness. Will God forgive them? Will He forgive us? Yes, He will. He demonstrated His willingness by His willingness to bear His cross and deny Himself in our behalf, that at such a time as this, He might extend to us His forgiveness and say, yes, I'll forgive you